Hey everyone, in this lesson we're going to look at ways our language shows that we're not very confident people, and it shows that we're afraid to give our opinions in case we upset someone or they get angry at us or we offend them because we have a different opinion. And without realizing it, many of us soften and change our language and use particular phrases so that we seem to agree with more people and we say everything politely. In some situations, this is a good thing because this means using our words with tact, using our words in a way that respects other people. But sometimes, if we use this language all the time, it's because that shows us as being weak people who can't give an opinion about anything and who are afraid to speak their minds. So we're going to look at examples of the kind of language where we lack confidence, and we'll go through some examples starting with speaking with disclaimers. When you speak with disclaimers, before you get to what you really want to say, you go around it slowly first because you're scared to upset someone or disagree with them. So we'll start here. Let's imagine the situation. You want to give your opinion about your friend's shoes. She's decided to wear green shoes and you just don't think they look good with that outfit she's wearing, that pink dress. It doesn't look the best thing you've ever seen, but you want to show that, unlike your friend, you disagree that it's a good thing. You could say, "This is just my opinion, but I don't think those green shoes look the best with that pink dress." And when I say it like that, it's a sensitive way to disagree. And for an issue about shoes, it's not a big deal. It's not going to make you sound really weak. So it depends on the situation that you're talking about. The next situation here, you might disagree, but imagine there's an issue where you think one thing and someone else you know thinks something else. You have opposite opinions. An example could be, you think it's unhealthy for children to eat chocolate every day, and you don't think they should. And in fact, you've got a son and you don't want him to eat chocolate every day. But the son's grandma might disagree and think it's good for children to eat chocolate all the time. You could say, "You might disagree, but I don't think kids should eat chocolate all the time, every day. It's unhealthy for them." Moving on. I'm not a professional, and I'm no expert, but we can use these phrases when we're in a situation where it seems like the other person there's got more experience than us. Perhaps they've got a proper job and perhaps we're just an intern. So we want to say something, but we're also thinking, "Oh, I could be wrong before I say that." So here's an example. I'm wearing a microphone here. Let's imagine this wasn't on the right way and I'm the intern and I realise that. I could say something like, I'm no expert, but shouldn't the microphone be the other way around?" Or the same situation, "I'm not sure if this is always the case, though in my experience, those microphones usually go that way around." And the reason we would say, in the situation I gave then, the reason we would say that very carefully is because in that situation, there might be a reason that we don't have a lot of authority there. We might really know everything. We might really know our stuff, but because we don't officially work there or we're not an important person, we have to use our words in more careful ways. And also we might be afraid about being wrong, so we don't want to say the wrong thing. Here are some other examples. It might just be me, but we can say this if we happen to disagree with the other people around us. We could also say, perhaps I misunderstood, and forgive me if I'm wrong. But all these examples we could use in a situation similar to the microphone example, where we think something different, but we're not 100% certain. So if I'm going back, using the microphone as an example, I could say, perhaps I misunderstood, but aren't microphones supposed to go this way around? Same example. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but aren't the microphones supposed to go this way? So there's some different phrases for communicating the same kind of idea there. I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm going to say it very carefully. Okay, now let's look at evading opinions. This evading means avoiding, missing out on giving opinions. We use this kind of language, or people use this kind of language, in situations where they are cautious about sharing their opinion with that person. Perhaps they don't want to get in an argument. Perhaps it's about a political issue, and they know if I start talking about that, well, things could get uncomfortable. So there are ways that people close down those kind of talks, and they won't say anything. And here are some signs of doing that. So these situations could be a hot political issue that people disagree about. For example, this could be, what do we do with refugees? And someone doesn't want to talk about it, so they say, it must be hard. I don't know much about it. Sorry, I don't know much about it. It must be hard to do what to do with them. I don't know much about it. And that has the result of finishing the conversation. Or they could simply say, one person could say loads and loads of things about the refugees and what they think should happen. And the other person at the end could just say, it's not really something I know about. And that finishes the discussion. This example here would be more if someone was talking about a whole area or field of expertise or study that you didn't know. So you didn't have a lot of confidence in that area. Perhaps they were talking about something for me it would be if they're talking about something in physics or mathematics. I don't know really much about that, and someone could be telling me lots of things about it, and I could just say, I haven't studied that, so I don't know. Now this, if that's true, that's fair enough in a way. If you really don't know about it, what can you say on that subject? But sometimes people will use, I haven't studied that, so I don't know about lots of things. We don't have to study everything in the world to have an opinion on. So just something to be aware of. And this one, I think it's a complex situation. So I don't know. Again, we could use this for the political issues that we don't want to talk about, or issues to do with society or culture or things like that. If it's a sensitive topic and you don't really want to talk to that person or say what you really think, sometimes people will say this. Now let's look at signs of self-doubt. This is a sign where you don't really... Let's say if you've been talking about something, giving an opinion, you know that you haven't really explained it 100%, and you haven't really convinced yourself that you explained it in a really good way, or you said something that was correct or accurate. You could just say at the end, blah, blah, blah. Here's my really long thing that I'm saying. I really don't believe I've said it in the best way possible. Then at the end you say, does that make sense? Now, people often use that at the end. And as well as sometimes it shows self-doubt that they already know it didn't make sense. And other times they say it after it's like long and complicated and it doesn't make sense. They say, does that make sense at the end? Because they just want you to say yes, even if it doesn't. Because it's a question at the end and it makes you agree. It's sometimes, and it's also a way of them ending their long point. Does that make sense? And you just say, yeah. And if you want, you can carry on talking about it after that. And a similar example is you have been explaining something for a while. Perhaps it was something quite complicated. And at the end you say, have I managed to get my point across? And in most situations, the other person will say, yeah, yes. Because when you ask a question like this, you're pushing them to give you a positive answer and say yes. Next, we've got more examples. Now let's look at ways of making oneself small, making myself small. When I make myself small, on one side we could look at it like modesty. I'm not going to talk about myself like I'm a big important person and I'm great at everything. That's true sometimes. But other sides, it's when we don't use words that describe us as we really are. So instead of saying the good things about ourselves, we would use language to always make us smaller and worse than other people and not as good. Let's look at some examples. So let's say you're talking about your job, or it could be you're talking about books or how you like writing. Here's an example sentence that shows making yourself small. I'm not a published author, but I do have a small blog. So if we break down this sentence, a published author is like a very important author who's, you can listen to published authors give their opinions about things. These people are worth listening to. Whereas you have just a small blog. It's so small, nobody comes to it. It's not important because it's so small. So by the comparison here, that's the way you make yourself look small. The comparison between the author that's been published by a publisher, somebody else, and the comparison between you who just do it by yourself. And we can break it down in more ways of saying if you do something by yourself, it's not as good as somebody giving you the job, or it could be about audience size. Next we've got, although I don't have a degree in psychology, I did take a few modules in it. Somebody might say this after a discussion has come up, could be talking about a disorder of a particular kind. It could be, let's say there was a discussion going on about should children be taking medications to control their energy levels in schools, things like that. If you didn't feel confident about giving your opinion on that, you could say, although I don't have a degree in psychology, I did take a few modules in it. Now, if we break this down, what this sentence is telling us indirectly is that, well, I don't have a degree, so I don't really know enough. I know a bit, but maybe I don't know as much as you because you've got a degree. And if you say you take a few modules makes it sound small as well. So this is like saying you know a little bit, but not that much, and you lack the confidence to just share your opinion. You could be very, very knowledgeable in general. You could be very, very knowledgeable about psychology and not have a degree. So if you go around saying things like this, even if you have all that knowledge on about psychology, you make it small because you say, oh, I haven't got a degree. So next, you could say this example if you happen to be talking to someone and it seemed like they seem like they know their stuff, and perhaps they argue back. You give an opinion, they argue back. The way some people deal with those kinds of people is just to say, well, you know more than me. You obviously know a lot more about this than I do. And this, you might say, because they're so good at arguing. Sometimes we misinterpret somebody who's really good at arguing and persuading us with their words for knowing a lot, for knowing more than us. But some people are better at speaking the things that they believe and getting other people to agree with them. It doesn't mean the same thing as they always are so intelligent and know everything. Another thing that many learners of English do is make themselves small by always having to get everybody there to know about their terrible English, how bad their English is in any situation. So you meet someone and the first thing they ever say to you is, sorry for my terrible English, even if they don't have terrible English and they speak quite good English a lot of the time. So on one side, we can say it's modesty. Sometimes people would like to say, well, they don't want to say, oh, I've got fantastic English. Oh, isn't my English so great? So they can be modest in a way. But in a lot of situations, it will just make the other people, the English people around you or the native speakers around you, a lot of the time it will more likely to make them think that your English isn't very good because you're not showing confidence at all. And the last example here is a comparison. When, let's say we've got a friend or somebody we know, I bake cakes, my friend makes cakes also, and what I do is I compare us, but I compare us in a way that I show myself to be bad and my friend is good. I could say something like this: oh, my cakes are nowhere near as are nowhere as good as yours. This is quite a conversational kind of phrase when we say something is nowhere as good as something else. And I think when people tend to say these things, when they tend to make these negative comparisons, they're really searching, they really want the other person to just give them a compliment and just say, oh, that's not true, yours are better than mine. So really when people say these kind of things, and in many but not all circumstances, it's not true. When they give the negative comparison, they just want you to give them some, they want you to give them some confidence. Now let's look at hesitant hedges. That's a way of saying, how do we say things and give those opinions in softer ways? How can we use language to reduce the force and the impact of what we want to say? Let's say for the first one, a situation where you disturbed somebody and you didn't want to take up a lot of their time. You could say, I just wanted to say, what makes this a hedge is the word just. Just is softer than saying, hey, I wanted to say blah, blah, blah. That you could surprise a person if you said that. But just has the effect of making the request smaller and softer. Perhaps you find it hard to give your opinion and to speak your mind so clearly, in which case you would say, it's sort of hard to say. Sort of. Sort of. What you really mean is, it's hard to say. I'm really struggling to say this. but you can't say it, so you say it's sort of. Another example is, I'm kind of sick today. What you really mean is, I'm sick today, I don't feel well, I'm ill. But when you say kind of, it's not as strong. And maybe we could look at this sentence as a form of an excuse, people would say. Perhaps this sentence would be, you felt like you had to go to work even though you were sick. It wasn't possible to call in sick. And now you're at work, you've had a problem, or you've had a problem with one of your colleagues. The day hasn't been going really well. You could give this as an excuse and say, I'm kind of sick today. We can also use suppose. When we use suppose, suppose means something like, I guess. I'm not 100% sure. And when we use suppose with might, because might isn't 100% certain either, we get all this uncertainty in the sentence. I suppose it might be because, when we bring in more and more words of uncertainty, that's a way of softening what we're going to say. Perhaps here, if we're giving an opinion that we know the other person won't like or might find difficult to hear, that's why we might say it this way with suppose and might. We'll say it so gently because we don't want to upset or offend that person. In this example here, I'm using maybe in the same way to soften. If I said to you, I need to think about it some more, perhaps I'm not sure, I want to say no. You've invited me at the weekend to go on a trip with you, and it could either be, I don't want to say no right now, and it could also be, honestly and genuinely, I need to think about it some more, I need more time. If I say maybe, that shows more hesitancy, more care taken in the time you need. You're not committing now when we say maybe. Another example is, I wondered if I could have a word with you about that. We say, can I have a word with you when we want to talk to someone? Usually we say, can I have a word with you? It means a short private talk. Just come here for a minute. Can I have a word with you? We're going to speak. If I say, I wondered if I could have a word with you about, I wonder is, I'm not certain you're going to say yes, and I'm saying it politely. I'm using the past. I could use the past tense or the present tense here. I could say, I wonder if I could have a word with you about, and I can also say, oh, hello, I wondered if I could have a word with you about. When I do this, I'm giving you the more ability to refuse me, because I'm not certain, because I'm only wondering now. I'm unsure if you will say yes. Of course, it means the exact same thing to say, can I have a word with you about? Only difference being this one is softer and more gentle before you ask for what you want. And the last example here is not an example with a specific situation. It's just to show how when we use words like possibly, we're not sure. When we say, oh, it's possibly this, when we say possibly, we're using a hedge to say we don't know something. We soften our language. And if we use I guess, when we say I guess it's because. It's not because we know it's because. It's not because we have confidence to say that. 100% certainty. Anyway, reason I'm using this example is to say that often when a person uses hedges in their speech, and they often soften their language, the sentences will be full of hedges, combinations of hedges that don't really add to the meaning, just have the impact of keeping that carefulness in the words. So thank you everybody for watching now. What I'd like to do now is you could possibly go and do the quiz, I guess, if you wanted to do it. And I suppose if you've got the time, you could do the quiz. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.